Hello, brothers and sisters. Welcome back to the words of Augur, a man who humbly realizes he does not know the infinite greatness of God. That's a humility we desperately need nowadays, where so many men and women of God like to speak stuff about God and they should be shutting up. Sorry to say it. Now, instead, Augur recognizes the only place you'll know God is through His revelation, His Word. That leads into a humble little prayer. Let us be as courageous as him to say, just give us what we need. But not more or less, just make me dependent on you. And I'll trust you. Now from there, he of course counterbalance the humility with the great pride and just bombards us with four ways pride can be manifested. Let me take note of that. The humility, the pride, it seems to be these elements that'll come up again and again throughout this chapter. Where Augur is going to use that repeated expression, 3, even 4, which I believe I mentioned last time, is this notion of there's so much more, there's 3, there's 4. It has this notion of there's so much more, but here's what I can give you for now. But of course, it never ends at the 3 and 4. They're just illustration to speak of something greater. That's why he keeps powdering a little bit of wisdom with these images, because he wants to teach us. He's not just saying a bunch of poetic stuff. He's trying to teach us with these 3 and even 4 things. So we'll look at 2 more of these groupings, but we'll focus more on what are they teaching. Here's what he says. The leech has 2 daughters. Give and give. 3 things are never satisfied. 4 never say enough. Hope you see the little numbers game here, right? 2, 3, and 4. That's the point. There's always more. There's always more. Now, why is this 2 leech has 2 daughters? This leech has 2 daughters, and why do they call the same thing? Repetition, poetic. The point is to say that I want to talk about this insatiable hunger for always more. That's what he wants to talk about now. We see it by his call here, right? He starts with this leech, repeats the idea that it's always about giving, and then even moves on to the fact that there's 3, even 4 that never said it seems satisfied or to have enough. And hit it up. Sheol, or the land of the dead, the barren womb, the land never satisfied with water, and the fire that never says enough. Of course, you understand that the idea that the land of the dead will always be calling for more dead, as you've probably heard before, this nice little expression. There's 2 things that are for sure in this world: taxes and death. Since the fall, everyone that lives will die. It is a surety. There'll never be an end of dying until Christ's return, of course. But the land of the dead will always be crying out for more dead. The same way that the barren woman, especially in that century, in that time back then, to have a baby meant you were worth something, you were important. A woman, even to this day, there's a sense of a need, of a desire to have a baby. Rare are those women who say, no, I never even thought of a baby. Of course not. It's natural, it's beautiful, it's what they want. The same thing for this land as well. I mean, especially when you consider he's writing this in Israel, where it's very dry. So more water? Please, yes. Never enough. And just like the fire too. Unless we do something to stop a fire, to crush it or something, to water it down, the fire will continue to spread. That's the whole thing about fire. It will consume all if not stopped. It consumed whole cities like Rome and Chicago if not stopped. And we get to see some counterbalances here, right? Between the fire that destroys and Sheol of the dead, and then the giving of life in land and the womb. But still, it's all about this insatiableness, this need for more. That's what Augur wants to talk about. That's what the image is pointing to. And it helps us understand this little touch of wisdom he gives us when he adds, "The eye that mocks a father and scorns to obey a mother will be picked out by the raven of the valley and eaten by the vultures." Basically, consequences if you dishonor your father and mother. Would say, yeah, of course. It's poetic, it's violent, but we understand that there's consequences if you dishonor your father and mother. And it kind of connects us back to that last section of 4 prideful things. One of them included this idea of not listening and not obeying your mother and father. So we get the connection, but then that's when we come back to what we just saw. Remember the imagery of insatiableness. Here's this behavior that started with one who doesn't honor their parents, and then it comes on to the fact that even mock them and scorn them. It gets even worse. See, that's what sin is. It's an unsatiable monster. You give it a bit of sin and it wants more. You give it a bit more and they'll want more. It never ends. It keeps getting worse and worse. And so are the consequences. See, that's the whole thing. We keep seeing even in the rest of Proverbs how sin gets bigger and bigger, but also the consequences get worse and worse all the way to death itself. Sorry. I believe that's what Augur is trying to get at here. How sin will never be satiated, and the consequence will always be more and more destructive as you keep the black hole gets bigger and bigger, the black hole called sin. But do we even take it seriously? We talk about sin, at least some churches do, but do we talk about how it's this black hole of evil that will just get bigger and bigger and suck us in? Do we talk about the seriousness, the consequences, even as believers? Or do we just say grace, grace, grace? We've seen recently many so-called men and women of God who fell because of sin, who want to be reestablished. People trying to cover it up and say it's not that bad. Let them continue in ministry. No. See, that's God speaking here. Now you will come back around. One more imagery, more poetic language, more 3, even 4, by saying 3 things are too wonderful for me. 4, I do not understand. We understand from this first and second expression, this repetition, these synonyms. He's talking about things that are just mind-blowing, things that are just too great for him to come to understand, to make sense of. What are they? What are these 3 and 4, and why is he saying this? So first, what are they? The way of an eagle in the sky, the way of a serpent on a rock, the way of a ship on the high seas, and the way of a man with a virgin. Now, I'll admit the last one was difficult to make sense of. So we'll start with the easy ones. The way of the eagle in the sky. Contrary to movies and animation, when eagles fly, you don't see lines. It doesn't go swoosh. It flies, and you can't see the lines. It's not like planes where you can see kind of the gas and going behind it. You don't know that the eagle has just flown. It's invisible. It is unseeable. So that's the first one. How about the one of the serpent too? I see the same thing. If a snake moves on the grass or on dirt or in the mud, you'll see the lines. But a rock, there will be no lines. There will be no marks. You'll never know a snake has just slithered on a rock. Again, invisible. Same thing happens when you think about a ship on the high seas, when there's waves everywhere. Even though most big ships might leave certain traces of waves behind them, when there's waves to the right and to the left, they all disappear. You can't know the ship has just passed because there's just waves everywhere. It seems invisible. Well, I think that's what he's trying to get at when he talks about the way of a man with a virgin. You can't understand what it's like for a guy to win over a girl. This isn't about, taking advantage of somebody. This is about love. The ways of love, invisible, right? Why does this guy get to win this girl and not that one? Why does this guy want this girl and not the other one? It, it's invisible. It's not understandable. And there's also that notion, like you said, that it's something that's inexplainable as well. Invisible, yes, but inexplainable. How does an eagle fly? How does a serpent get to, by moving around, crawl around? Or these ships, how come they can go through these giant waves and actually make it without being crushed? How can you win a woman's heart, right? Why does it work with that woman and then it doesn't work with the other one? So invisible, unexplainable, that's the point. And then we move on to his bit of wisdom. This is the way of the adult of an, don't miss this, huh? This is the way. He's referring back to what we've seen before. This is the way of an adulteress. She eats and wipes her mouth and says, I have done it wrong. Again, she's trying to be invisible. Sin. When we try to cover it up, right? When we hope nobody saw us, there's this sense of invisibility. All these men and women I was mentioning that fell into great sin, and nobody saw it coming because they wiped their mouth. They were to cover up sin. It was hidden, like it never happened. No traces, invisible. What a great destructive mystery, right? We just saw how destructive sin can be, but what if you're good at covering it up? That's not a good thing. It's not a good thing to have also that reasoning that says, I've just sinned, let me cover it up, now I'll just keep going. Especially as Christians, as believers, we must confess. We are called to put it into light, as Paul tells the Ephesians, and to condemn it in our own lives as much as in the world. There needs to be accountability, like James says. Confess your sins to one another. So, this shouldn't make any sense to us. This covering up a sin. This cleverness that we may have to know how to cover sin. It should not be a good thing. It should blow our mind that we would even think like that. Oh, may the Lord help us to take sin seriously. I believe that's what Augur is getting at right now. I believe that the Lord, through this wise man, he's trying to tell us, take sin seriously. It will destroy you and it will convict you to cover it up in greater and greater ways. And that should scare us. So on that note, brothers and sisters, let us be careful.